On Christmas morning, my son looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Mom, don't ever come back here again. You're watching Letters to Helen. Subscribe and drop your city in the comments. Today's hello is for Monica from Ohio. Thank you for being here. My name is Margaret, and I'm 72 years old. I've been a widow for 8 years now, ever since my husband Robert passed from cancer. For most of my adult life, I thought I knew what family meant. I thought love was something you could count on, especially between a mother and her children. I was wrong about a lot of things. I have 2 children. My daughter Sarah lives in Portland with her husband and twin boys. She calls me every Sunday, visits twice a year, and always remembers my birthday. Then there's my son Michael, 45 years old, married to a woman named Brenda, with 2 teenage kids, Emma, who's 16, and Jake, who's 14. They live just 20 minutes away from me in the same town where I raised Michael, where I thought we'd always be close. For the past 5 years, something has been slowly dying between us. At first, I blamed it on Brenda. She never seemed to warm up to me, always had an excuse when I invited them for dinner, always seemed annoyed when I called. But over time, I realized the distance wasn't just coming from her. It was coming from Michael, too. You see, when Robert got sick, Michael was going through his own crisis. His construction business was failing. The housing market had crashed, and he couldn't find steady work. Brenda was working part-time at a dental office, but it wasn't enough to cover their mortgage, let alone the kids' school supplies and Emma's dance lessons that she loved so much. While I was watching my husband waste away in a hospital bed, while I was driving back and forth to chemotherapy appointments and selling our wedding rings to pay for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover, Michael came to me with tears in his eyes. He said they were going to lose the house. He said the bank had already started foreclosure proceedings. What was I supposed to do? Let my grandchildren become homeless? Let my son's family fall apart while I was already watching my husband die? So I did what any mother would do. I took out a second mortgage on the house Robert and I had spent 30 years paying off. I gave Michael $47,000, not a loan, a gift. I told him family doesn't keep score. Family just helps when help is needed. That was 7 years ago. Michael's business recovered. They kept their house. Emma continued her dance lessons and even got a scholarship to a performing arts program. Jake joined the baseball team and needed new equipment every season. They took vacations to Disney World and the Grand Canyon. They bought a new car, then another one, and slowly, visit by visit, phone call by phone call, I felt myself becoming a stranger in my son's life. After Robert died, the loneliness hit me like a physical thing. I'd wake up in our big empty house and remember that I had family. I had people who loved me, just 20 minutes away. So I'd call Michael. Sometimes he'd answer, sometimes he wouldn't. When I'd suggest coming over for Sunday dinner like we used to do when he was growing up, there was always a reason why it wasn't a good time. "We're really busy, Mom. The kids have plans. Brenda's not feeling well. Maybe next weekend." Next weekend never came. I started showing up unannounced, just for short visits. I'd bring groceries or a homemade pie, thinking maybe if I was useful, if I contributed something, they'd be happier to see me. But I could feel the tension the moment I walked in. Brenda would get that tight smile on her face. Michael would check his watch. The kids would barely look up from their phones. I wasn't welcome in the home I'd helped save, but I kept trying. What else was I supposed to do? They were my family. Michael was the baby I'd rocked to sleep, the little boy who used to beg me to read him one more bedtime story, the teenager who came to me when his first girlfriend broke his heart. Somewhere inside this distant, busy man was still my son. I just had to find a way back to him. Let me tell you about the years when Michael actually needed me, so you'll understand why his rejection hurt so much. When Michael was 22 and fresh out of community college with a certificate in construction management, he moved in with Brenda. She was pregnant with Emma, and they were both scared kids trying to figure out how to become parents. They lived in a tiny apartment above a pizza shop where the smell of pepperoni and grease soaked into everything they owned. I remember the night Emma was born. Michael called me at 2 a.m. his voice shaking. "Mom, something's wrong. Brenda's bleeding, and the doctors look worried." I drove to the hospital in my nightgown and stayed there for 18 hours until we knew both mother and baby were safe. When they finally let me hold Emma for the first time, Michael cried and said, "I don't know how to be a dad, Mom. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." I told him what I'd told him 1,000 times growing up. You don't have to be strong enough for everything at once. You just have to be strong enough for today. During Emma's first year, I was there 3 times a week. I brought diapers when they couldn't afford them. I watched Emma while Brenda took evening shifts at a restaurant because they needed the money. When Emma got ear infections and cried all night, I'd come over at midnight and walk the floors with her so Michael and Brenda could sleep. When Jake came along 2 years later, I was the one who helped Brenda through her postpartum depression. She barely wanted to hold the baby those first few weeks, just sat in their bedroom crying. Michael was working long hours trying to establish his business, and Brenda felt completely overwhelmed. I spent entire days at their apartment, feeding Jake, changing him, doing their laundry, cooking meals they could reheat later. One afternoon, Brenda looked at me and said, "I don't know what we would have done without you, Margaret. You saved us." That was back when she still called me by my first name, before she started calling me Michael's mom, like I was a stranger. When they finally saved enough for a down payment on their first house, I co-signed the loan because their credit wasn't established yet. It was a small 3-bedroom ranch with a fenced backyard where the kids could play safely. I helped them paint every room, planted flowers in the front garden, and sewed curtains for Emma's room with fabric covered in dancing ballerinas. As the kids grew up, I was the grandmother who never missed a school play, a baseball game, or a dance recital. I was the one who took Emma shopping for her first training bra when she was too embarrassed to ask her mother. I was the one who taught Jake how to ride a bike and later how to throw a curveball. When they needed school supplies, I showed up with bags full of notebooks and colored pencils. When Emma wanted to take piano lessons, I bought her a keyboard and paid for her first year of instruction. During those years, Michael would hug me at the end of every visit and say, "Thanks for everything, Mom. I love you." We had Sunday dinners where Emma would tell me about her friends at school and Jake would show me his latest art project. Brenda would actually smile when I walked in the door, and sometimes we'd sit at the kitchen table drinking coffee while the kids played in the backyard. I thought those days would last forever. I thought being a helpful grandmother meant I'd always have a place in their lives. But as Michael's business grew more successful, as they paid off debts and started buying nicer things, the invitations became less frequent. The phone calls got shorter. When I'd offer to help with something, Michael would say, "Don't worry about it, Mom. We've got it handled." I should have been proud that they'd become independent. Instead, I felt like I was being pushed out of their lives, one polite rejection at a time. The first time I really noticed how much things had changed was at Jake's 10th birthday party. I arrived with a present I'd spent weeks choosing, a professional-grade baseball glove that cost me $200. Jake opened it, said, "Thanks, Grandma," without looking up, and immediately went back to playing with some electronic gadget his parents had bought him. I watched from the corner of the room as neighbors and other family friends laughed and talked, while I sat alone on the couch like an uncomfortable stranger. When it was time to cut the cake, nobody called me over for pictures. When they sang "Happy Birthday," I realized I was standing behind everyone else, not part of the inner circle anymore. That's when I understood that my usefulness had expired. They didn't need my babysitting, my co-signed loans, my emergency financial help, my homemade meals, or my hand-sewn gifts anymore. What I couldn't understand was why that meant they didn't need me at all. Had I raised a son who only loved me when I was useful? Had I taught him that family relationships were transactional, that you show up when you need something and disappear when you don't? Or was I just a foolish old woman who'd confused being needed with being wanted? The first time I really felt unwelcome in my son's house was on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October, about 3 years ago. I'd been having chest pains that morning. Not severe, but concerning enough that I'd called my doctor. He'd told me to come in immediately and after an EKG and some tests, he'd assured me it was just anxiety and stress. But I was shaken. I drove to Michael's house because I needed to see family. I needed to be reminded that I wasn't alone in the world. When I knocked on the door, Emma answered with her backpack still on. She'd just gotten home from school. "Hi, Grandma," she said, but her tone was flat, almost annoyed. "Is your dad home, sweetheart?" I asked. "He's in his office on a work call. Mom's at her book club." I'd forgotten that Brenda had joined a book club. Strange how I used to know everyone's schedule, and now I was always showing up at inconvenient times. "I'll just wait for him to finish," I said, stepping inside. Emma disappeared upstairs without another word. I sat in their living room, looking around at the photos on the mantel. There were dozens of family pictures, vacation shots, school portraits, candid moments of laughter. I was in maybe 3 of them, always standing slightly apart from the main group, always looking a bit out of place. When Michael finally emerged from his office 20 minutes later, he looked startled to see me. "Mom, what's going on? Is everything okay?" "I just wanted to visit," I said. "I had a little health scare today and "A health scare?" His voice was concerned, but I noticed he stayed standing instead of sitting down next to me. "What happened? Are you all right?" I explained about the chest pains and the doctor's visit, how I'd been told it was just stress, but how scared I'd been sitting in that waiting room alone, thinking about what would happen if something serious was wrong with me. Michael listened, nodding occasionally, but I could see his mind was somewhere else. When I finished talking, he said, "Well, I'm glad you're okay, but Mom, you really should call before coming over. I've got 3 estimates to finish tonight, and Brenda's expecting me to have dinner started when she gets home." "I could start dinner," I offered. "I know where everything is. That's not the point," he said, and something in his tone made me feel like a scolded child. "The point is that we have routines, and it's disruptive when you just show up." Disruptive. That's the word he used to describe his mother's presence. "I'm sorry," I said, gathering my purse. "I didn't realize I needed an appointment to see my family." "Don't be dramatic, Mom. You know that's not what I meant." But it was exactly what he meant. I could see it in the way he looked at his watch, in the way he walked toward the door to signal that my visit was over. As I was leaving, Jake came downstairs with his baseball uniform on. "Hey, Grandma," he said, and his smile was genuine in a way that broke my heart a little. "We have a game tonight. You should come watch." Before I could answer, Michael jumped in. "Grandma's busy tonight, buddy. Maybe next time." I wasn't busy. I hadn't been busy on a weeknight in years, but I didn't contradict him. "Next time," I agreed, and kissed Jake's forehead. He smelled like grass and boy sweat and innocence. The next week, I decided to try a different approach. Instead of just showing up, I called first. Brenda answered the phone. "Hi, Brenda. I was hoping I could take Emma shopping for some new school clothes this weekend. She's growing so fast." "Oh, that's sweet of you to offer, Margaret. But we actually just took her shopping last weekend. She's all set for the season." "What about Jake? Does he need anything?" "Michael handles Jake's stuff, but thanks for thinking of them." There was something in her voice, not quite rude, but definitely dismissive, like she was talking to a persistent salesperson rather than her children's grandmother. "Well, maybe I could just come over for dinner Sunday. I could bring dessert. This Sunday's not good. Emma has a friend coming over and we're trying to keep things low-key. Maybe some other time?" Some other time never came, of course. I started paying attention to their social media posts, which felt pathetic but was the only way I could keep track of what was happening in their lives. I saw pictures of birthday parties I wasn't invited to, family game nights I wasn't included in, holiday preparations I didn't know about. In one photo, they were all decorating their Christmas tree, laughing, and covered in tinsel. The caption read, "Perfect family night with our favorite people." I stared at that picture for a long time, wondering when I'd stop being one of their favorite people. I tried to convince myself that I was being oversensitive, that families naturally evolve and change over time. But deep down, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The son who used to call me his best friend now treated me like an obligation. The daughter-in-law who used to confide in me now spoke to me like a polite stranger. The grandchildren who used to run to hug me when I arrived now barely looked up from their screens. I was becoming a ghost in my own family's life. The real breaking point came last spring, during what should have been a celebration. Emma had been accepted to a prestigious summer dance intensive program in Chicago. It was a huge honor. Only 30 kids from across the country were selected. The program cost $3,000, plus travel and accommodation expenses. I found out about it not from Michael or Brenda, but from Emma herself. I'd run into her at the grocery store where she was working her first part-time job, bagging groceries after school to save money for dance competitions. "Grandma," she said, her face lighting up in a way that reminded me of the little girl who used to climb into my lap to hear stories. "Guess what? I got into the Chicago intensive. Can you believe it?" "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, genuinely thrilled for her. "When do you leave?" "Well, I don't know if I'm actually going," she said, her excitement dimming. "It's really expensive, and Mom and Dad are already paying for my regular dance classes and Jake's baseball league fees. They said we'll have to see." My heart broke watching her try to hide her disappointment. This was my granddaughter, the little girl I'd watched grow from a wobbly toddler into a graceful young woman, the child whose first dance recital had made me cry with pride, the teenager who still, occasionally, asked for my opinion on things that mattered to her. "How much does it cost?" I asked. When she told me, I made a decision on the spot. "I'll pay for it." Her eyes went wide. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course I would. This is your dream, Emma. Dreams are worth investing in." I drove straight to their house that afternoon, a check already written in my purse. Michael was in the garage working on his truck, and Brenda was in the kitchen preparing dinner. I told them both about my conversation with Emma and my offer to fund her trip. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Michael wiped his hands on a rag and said, "Mom, we appreciate the offer, but we can handle our own kids' expenses." "I know you can handle them," I said, "but why should Emma miss this opportunity while you're figuring out the finances? I have the money. I want to help." "That's not the point," Brenda said, her voice tight with irritation. "The point is that we're her parents. We make decisions about what she can and can't do. We don't need you swooping in and undermining our authority." "Undermining their authority?" I was trying to help my granddaughter achieve her dreams. "I'm not trying to undermine anything," I said. "I'm trying to give Emma a gift." "What's wrong with that?" "What's wrong," Michael said, "is that you always do this. You think money solves everything. You think if you just throw enough cash at a situation, people will be grateful and include you in their lives." His words hit me like a physical slap. "That's not true, isn't it?" Michael's voice was getting louder, more aggressive than I'd ever heard it. "When's the last time you visited us without bringing money or gifts or offers to pay for something? When's the last time you just came over to spend time with us without trying to fix or buy or solve something?" I stood there in his kitchen, trying to remember. The truth was, I couldn't. "I bring gifts because I love you," I said weakly. "No, Mom. You bring gifts because you're trying to buy your way into our lives. Because you're lonely and you think if you make yourself useful enough, indispensable enough, we'll have to want you around." Brenda was nodding along with every word. Her arms crossed over her chest like a barrier between us. "That's cruel, Michael," I said, tears starting to burn my eyes. "What's cruel is the way you guilt trip us when we don't respond the way you want. What's cruel is the way you show up unannounced and then act hurt when we're busy. What's cruel is the way you try to parent our children through your checkbook instead of respecting the boundaries we've tried to set." "What boundaries?" I asked. "You never told me about any boundaries." "We shouldn't have to," Brenda interjected. "Adults understand social cues. Adults understand that relationships need space to breathe." I felt like I was drowning. These were my son and his wife, people I'd loved and helped and supported for over 20 years, and they were talking to me like I was some kind of stalker. "I never meant to overstep," I said. "I just wanted to be part of your lives. I just wanted to matter to someone." "And that's the problem," Michael said, his voice softer now but somehow more devastating. "You want us to fill the hole Dad left. You want us to be your whole social life, your entire emotional support system. That's not fair to us, Mom. That's not healthy." I looked around their kitchen, the kitchen I'd helped design when they bought the house, where I'd cooked countless meals, where I'd bandaged scraped knees and helped with homework and listened to teenage problems. Now I felt like an intruder in this space. "So what are you saying?" I asked. "That you don't want me in your lives at all?" "We're saying we need you to respect our independence," Brenda said. "We're saying you need to find your own life, instead of trying to live through ours." I left the check for Emma's dance program on their counter and walked out without another word. And if this story already touches your heart, please give it a like. It really helps me share these letters with more people. 2 days later, Michael called to tell me they were returning the money. Emma wouldn't be going to Chicago after all. After that confrontation in their kitchen, I tried to do what they'd asked. I tried to give them space. I tried to build my own life that didn't revolve around their needs and schedules and approval. I joined a book club at the library. I volunteered at the local animal shelter. I took a watercolor painting class at the community college. I even went on a few dates with a widowed man named Frank, who I'd met at the senior center. For 3 months, I didn't call Michael unless it was absolutely necessary. I didn't drop by unannounced. I didn't offer money or unsolicited help or gifts for the grandchildren. I thought I was doing what they wanted. I thought I was becoming the independent, self-sufficient mother they demanded. But the silence felt like death. On Jake's 14th birthday, in September, I waited for an invitation that never came. I saw photos on social media of his party, a backyard barbecue with his baseball team and school friends. Brenda's parents were there, smiling and laughing in several pictures. Her sister and brother-in-law were there with their kids, but not me. I hadn't even known it was happening. 2 weeks later, I ran into Michael at the hardware store. He was buying supplies for some home repair project, and he looked genuinely surprised to see me. "Hey, Mom," he said somewhat awkwardly. "How have you been?" "I've been fine," I lied, "keeping busy with my new activities." "That's great. That's really great." He seemed relieved that I wasn't falling apart without them. "Brenda mentioned you joined a book club." So they had been talking about me. They knew I was trying to rebuild my life, but they hadn't thought to include me in Jake's birthday celebration anyway. "I missed Jake's party," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, it was just a small thing. You know how kids are. He only wanted his friends there." "What about Brenda's parents? Were they just friends too?" Michael's jaw tightened. "That's different, Mom. They understand boundaries better." There it was again. Boundaries. The word that had become a weapon against me. "I see," I said. "Well, give Jake my love. Tell him his grandmother is thinking of him." I started to walk away, but Michael caught my arm. "Mom, wait. Look, I know things have been difficult between us lately, but it's for the best. You seem happier now. More independent. That's good. You think I seem happier?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perception. "Yeah, I do. You're not calling all the time or worrying about our every decision. You have your own life now." He was right that I wasn't calling all the time anymore, but he was completely wrong about the happiness part. I was lonelier than I'd ever been in my life. The activities I'd joined felt hollow, because I had no one to share them with. The books I was reading, the paintings I was attempting, the conversations with new acquaintances, none of it mattered because the people I loved most weren't part of it. But I smiled and nodded because that's what he wanted to see. "I'm glad you think so," I said. The second major confrontation happened in November, just a few weeks before that fatal Christmas morning. Emma had sprained her ankle badly during dance practice and needed surgery to repair torn ligaments. I found out about it 3 days after the fact when I called to check in on everyone, and Emma answered the phone, high on pain medication and chatty in a way she hadn't been with me in years. "Grandma, I had surgery," she said, her words slightly slurred. "They put screws in my ankle. Want to see the x-rays?" My heart stopped. "Surgery? When? Are you okay?" "Tuesday. Yeah, I'm fine. Just stuck on the couch for like 6 weeks. It's so boring. Tuesday was 3 days ago. My granddaughter had undergone surgery, and nobody had told me. When Michael got on the phone, I tried to stay calm. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked. I would have wanted to be there. To help? Mom, it was a minor procedure. We had everything under control. She's my granddaughter, Michael. Don't you think I had a right to know she was having surgery? Look, we've been over this. We're trying to handle our own family issues without involving everyone in every little drama. Every little drama. My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay composed. Your daughter having surgery is drama? You know what I mean. You have a tendency to make everything bigger than it needs to be. Emma's fine. The surgery went well. There was no reason to worry you. The reason to tell me is that I love her. The reason to include me is that she's my family too. There was a long pause before Michael said, "Maybe she's your family, but we're not obligated to manage your emotional needs every time something happens in our lives." That night, I sent Emma flowers and a care package with books and magazines and her favorite candy. I included a card that said, "Thinking of you and wishing you a speedy recovery. Love, Grandma." Brenda called me the next day to say that while they appreciated the gesture, they preferred I check with them before sending gifts to the children. I was being managed, controlled, marginalized in my own family's life, one boundary at a time. Christmas had always been my favorite holiday. For decades, it was the one day when our whole family came together without distractions, when we focused on love and gratitude and the simple joy of being together. This Christmas was going to be different. I could feel it in the perfunctory invitation, a text message from Brenda 3 days before, saying, "Christmas dinner at 2 if you'd like to join us." Not the warm phone call with excited planning that used to happen weeks in advance. Not the collaborative menu making or the coordinated gift buying. Just a polite last-minute invitation that felt more like an obligation than a genuine welcome. But I was determined to make it work. I'd spent weeks choosing thoughtful gifts. For Emma, I'd found a beautiful silver necklace with a small dancing figure charm. For Jake, a vintage baseball card he'd mentioned wanting months earlier. I'd tracked it down through 3 different collector shops. For Michael, a leather tool organizer I'd had custom made with his initials. For Brenda, an expensive scarf from her favorite boutique. And for all of them together, I'd prepared something special, something I'd been working on for months. I arrived at their house at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying bags of carefully wrapped presents and a homemade apple pie, Robert's favorite recipe that I'd been making for Christmas for 40 years. The atmosphere felt wrong from the moment I walked in. Everyone was polite but distant, like actors playing family members rather than actually being family. Emma hugged me dutifully but didn't meet my eyes. Jake mumbled hello from the couch where he was absorbed in his phone. Michael took my coat but didn't ask how I was doing. Brenda thanked me for the pie with the same tone she might have used with a delivery person. Dinner was awkward and stilted. Every topic I brought up seemed to fall flat. When I asked about Emma's ankle recovery, she gave one-word answers. When I tried to engage Jake about baseball season, he shrugged and said it was fine. When I mentioned my watercolor class, Michael made polite sounds but clearly wasn't listening. I felt like a stranger who'd accidentally wandered into someone else's family gathering. After dinner, we moved to the living room for gifts. I watched as they exchanged presents with each other. Thoughtful, personal items that showed how well they knew each other's interests and needs. They laughed and hugged and took pictures, and I sat on the edge of it all like an audience member watching a play. When it was time for my gifts, the politeness became almost painful. Emma smiled and said the necklace was pretty, but I could tell she was just being kind. Jake thanked me for the baseball card without really looking at it. Michael appreciated the tool organizer but set it aside immediately. Brenda held the scarf up briefly and said it was lovely. They'd given me a generic gift card to a restaurant chain and a potted plant, the kind of presents you give to acquaintances you don't know very well. But I still had my special gift, the one I'd been working on for months. "I have one more thing," I said, pulling out a thick photo album bound in burgundy leather. "I thought you might like to have this." I'd spent countless hours creating it, a complete photographic history, of Michael's life from birth to present day. Baby pictures, school photos, birthday parties, graduations, his wedding day, the births of his children, family vacations, holiday celebrations, 45 years of memories, carefully organized and annotated with dates and stories. But more than that, it was proof. Proof of all the moments I'd been there, all the times I'd been not just present, but essential to their lives. The photos showed me holding newborn Emma in the hospital, cheering at Jake's Little League games, helping Emma with her Halloween costume, teaching Jake to ride his bike, celebrating every milestone, every achievement, every important moment. I'd written captions under each photo, little stories about the memories they represented. The time Emma had fallen asleep in my lap during a Christmas Eve service. The afternoon Jake and I had built a fort in my backyard and pretended we were explorers. The day Michael had graduated from community college and told me he couldn't have done it without my support. I thought it would remind them of who we used to be together. I thought it would show them that I wasn't just a lonely old woman trying to insert herself into their lives. I was someone who had always been part of their story. Michael flipped through a few pages, his expression unreadable. Brenda glanced over his shoulder with that tight smile I'd come to hate. Emma and Jake didn't even look up from their new gifts. Finally, Michael closed the album and set it on the coffee table. "This is nice, Mom," he said. "Thanks. That's it. This is nice. 45 years of love and memories and sacrifice reduced to, this is nice." Something inside me finally broke. "Do you remember any of these moments?" I asked, my voice starting to shake. "Do you remember being grateful for any of this help? Do you remember ever loving me?" The room went dead silent. "Mom," Michael said, his voice warning. "No, I need to say this. I need to understand. When I became the enemy in your life, when did caring about you become a crime? When did wanting to be part of your family become something shameful?" "You're being dramatic again," Brenda said coldly. Am I? Am I really? Because from where I'm sitting, I've been systematically erased from your lives. I'm not told about surgeries or birthday parties. I'm not invited to important events. I'm treated like some kind of burden that you tolerate out of obligation. Michael stood up, his jaw clenched. "You want to know the truth, Mom? The truth is that you're exhausting. Everything is about you. Every conversation, every visit, every interaction has to center around your feelings, your needs, your loneliness. We can't live our lives without you making it about what we're not giving you." "That's not true," I whispered. "It is true, and we're tired of it. We're tired of feeling guilty for having boundaries. We're tired of managing your emotions. We're tired of you." The words hung in the air like poison. "So don't," I said, standing up and gathering my purse. "Don't manage my emotions. Don't feel guilty about your boundaries. Don't worry about me at all." I was walking toward the door when Michael delivered the final blow. "Mom," he called after me, "don't come back here. I mean it. We need you to stay away from us. We need you to leave us alone." I turned around one last time, looking at the 4 people I'd loved more than my own life. "Merry Christmas," I said. Then I walked out into the cold. I drove home through empty Christmas streets, tears blurring my vision until I had to pull over twice to compose myself. When I finally made it to my house, I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time, staring at the dark windows and wondering what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. Inside, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen table with the silence pressing down on me like a weight. The house felt bigger and emptier than ever. On the counter sat Christmas cards from old friends, neighbors, distant relatives, people who still remembered I existed, but none from my son's family. That's when I remembered the gift I hadn't given them, the one I'd been saving for last, the one that was still in my purse. It wasn't a photo album or a piece of jewelry or anything they could politely accept and then forget about. It was a legal document. Specifically, it was my will. You see, after Robert died, I'd updated my will to leave everything to Michael and the children. The house, my savings account, my life insurance policy, Robert's pension benefits that would transfer to my beneficiaries. Altogether, it amounted to just over $400,000. I'd planned to tell them about it on Christmas, to let them know that even though I wouldn't be around forever, I was still finding ways to take care of them. But sitting alone in my kitchen on Christmas night, I realized something that should have been obvious months ago. They didn't want my care. They'd made that abundantly clear. They wanted their independence, their boundaries, their freedom from managing my emotional needs. So I decided to give them exactly what they'd asked for. The next morning, I drove to my lawyer's office. Harold Brennan had handled Robert's estate and had been our family attorney for 20 years. His office was closed for the holiday week, but I knew he lived in the apartment above his practice. When I knocked on his door at 8 in the morning, still wearing yesterday's Christmas dress, he took one look at my face and invited me in. "Margaret, what's happened? Are you all right?" I told him everything, the whole story, from the gradual distancing to the boundaries conversation, to yesterday's final rejection. Harold listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making sympathetic sounds. When I finished, I said, "I want to change my will." "Are you sure? Family disputes can be emotional, but they often resolve themselves given time." "Harold," my son told me never to come back. He said they're tired of me. Those aren't words you can take back or explain away. He meant them, and I believe him. We spent the next 2 hours drafting a new will. I left small amounts to Emma and Jake, enough for college funds, but held in trust until they turned 25, with the stipulation that the money couldn't be accessed or controlled by their parents. The rest of my estate would go to various charities: the animal shelter where I volunteered, the community college scholarship fund, the children's hospital where Emma had been born. But that wasn't the real gift I wanted to give them. Over the next 3 weeks, I systematically began giving away my possessions while I was still alive to see it happen. I donated Robert's tools to a job training program for young men transitioning out of foster care. I gave my china and silver to a non-profit that provided furnishings for domestic violence survivors starting over in new homes. I donated most of my clothes to a women's shelter. I kept only what I needed to live comfortably, plus a few items with sentimental value that nobody else would understand or appreciate. Then I put my house on the market. The realtor was shocked. "Mrs. Henderson, this is a beautiful home in an excellent neighborhood. Are you sure you want to sell? Where will you go?" "I'm moving to Florida," I said. It was the first time I'd said it out loud, but as soon as the words came out, I knew it was true. "I have a friend from high school who lives in a retirement community in Sarasota. She's been asking me to visit for years. It wasn't just about the distance, though that was part of it. It was about starting over completely, about building a life that didn't revolve around people who didn't want me in theirs." The house sold in 2 weeks to a young couple expecting their first baby. When I saw them walking through the rooms, talking excitedly about their plans for the nursery and the garden, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. I called my friend Dorothy in Florida. "Remember how you always said there was a place for me at Sunset Gardens if I ever wanted a change of scenery?" "Margaret, of course. When can you come?" "How about next month?" The beauty of my plan was its completeness. Michael had told me to leave them alone, so I was leaving them alone in the most thorough way possible. No more unexpected visits because I'd be 800 miles away. No more phone calls because I'd have a new number they didn't know. No more guilt-inducing gifts because I'd have a new life, filled with new people who might actually want my company. But most importantly, no more financial safety net. When I left town, I'd take my checkbook with me. I've been living in Florida for 6 months now, and I can honestly say I'm happier than I've been in years. Sunset Gardens isn't some depressing nursing home. It's an active retirement community with golf courses, art studios, book clubs, volunteer opportunities, and more social activities than I can possibly participate in. I have new friends who invite me to dinner parties and ask my opinion on books we've read together. I've learned to play bridge and discovered I'm quite good at it. I volunteer at a local elementary school, reading to children whose grandparents live too far away to visit regularly. These kids light up when they see me, and their hugs are genuine and enthusiastic. For the first time in years, I feel wanted instead of tolerated. About 3 months after I moved, I got a phone call from Harold Brennan. Michael had contacted him, looking for me. What should I tell him? Harold asked. Tell him I'm fine, and that I'm respecting his wishes by staying out of his life. Margaret, he sounded quite concerned. Apparently the house sold, and you left without giving them your new address or phone number. That's correct. He's asking if there's some way to reach you. He says the family wants to make sure you're all right. I thought about that for a long time. Part of me was tempted to give Harold my new number, to open the door just a crack, to see if Michael had come to his senses. But then I remembered Christmas morning. I remembered the words that couldn't be taken back. Harold, tell Michael that I'm more than all right. Tell him I've found a wonderful new community where I'm appreciated and included. Tell him I'm grateful to him for forcing me to realize I needed to build my own life instead of trying to live through his. Are you sure? I'm sure. 2 weeks later, I got another call from Harold. This time, Michael had been more persistent. He's asking about your will, Margaret. He seems to think you might have changed it. I did change it. There was a long pause. I see. Do you want me to tell him that? You can tell him that my estate planning reflects my current family relationships. If he wants more details, he can make an appointment to discuss it after I'm dead. I know that sounds harsh, but I've learned something important these past months. Love shouldn't be conditional on usefulness. Family shouldn't be a one-way street where only one person gives and sacrifices and adjusts their behavior to maintain the relationship. Michael taught me that actions have consequences. For years, I'd enabled their treatment of me by accepting scraps of attention and being grateful for minimal inclusion. I'd taught them that they could push me away whenever they wanted space, and I'd still be there with my checkbook open whenever they needed something. Well, I've learned to have boundaries too. The irony is that in trying to get rid of me, Michael accomplished something I'd been trying to do for years. He forced me to become independent. Not the kind of independence where I was still hoping for their approval and validation, but real independence where I stopped needing their love to feel worthwhile. I think about Emma and Jake sometimes. I wonder if they miss me at all, or if they've even noticed I'm gone. I wonder if they'll understand someday why their grandmother disappeared from their lives, or if they'll grow up thinking I just didn't care enough to stay in touch. That's the hardest part, knowing that my absence might hurt them, even though my presence had become unwelcome. But I console myself with the knowledge that they still have loving grandparents in Brenda's parents. They'll be fine without me. As for Michael, I hope he's gotten what he wanted. I hope he's enjoying his boundaries and his freedom from managing my emotional needs. I hope he feels good about the choices he made. And if someday he realizes what he lost, if he ever understands that having a parent who loves you unconditionally is actually a gift rather than a burden, well, it will be too late then. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it with acceptance. I gave Michael and his family 25 years of my heart, my time, my money, and my devotion. When they decided that wasn't enough or wasn't wanted, I respected their decision by removing myself from their lives completely. The gift I gave them that Christmas wasn't the photo album, or the offers of money, or even my continued presence in their lives. The gift I gave them was my absence. The gift was letting them go. And in giving them that gift, I gave myself something even more valuable, the chance to discover that I could be happy without them. Do you think I was right to cut all contact with my family? Or should I have tried harder to repair the relationship? Have you ever been in a situation where love felt one-sided, where you had to choose between your dignity and your desperate need to belong somewhere? What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever faced something like this in your own family? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to tell me what city you're watching from. Thank you so much for listening until the very end. This is Letters to Helen, and I'll see you in the next story.